You ever notice how people pretend they've got everything under control until you walk into their thoughts? Funny thing is, you don't even have to say a word. Your existence alone. That's enough to shake something loose inside them. Enough to make them restless. Enough to make them pay, literally, to sit in a quiet room and try to figure out why your name won't leave their head. Imagine that. $1,800 just to talk about you. Not their childhood, not their fears, not their broken dreams. No, you. Session after session. Circling the same obsession like it's a wound they can't stop touching. And the so-called professional sitting across from them, smiling, nodding, pretending they understand, until even they can't take it anymore. Because here's the truth people don't like to admit. Some presences can't be explained, can't be analyzed, can't be fixed. They disrupt, they linger. They rewrite the rules without asking permission. And when someone becomes that unforgettable, that unavoidable, it doesn't just bother people. It breaks the system designed to make sense of everything. And that's when things get interesting. They don't talk about you because they want to. That's the first illusion. People like to believe they're in control of their own thoughts. That what they focus on is a choice, something they can switch on and off like a light. But obsession doesn't work like that. It creeps in quietly, unnoticed at first, like a crack forming in glass. One moment everything seems fine, and the next, something about you gets stuck in their mind, like a splinter they can't reach. You didn't ask for their attention. You didn't beg for their validation. You didn't stand there screaming for recognition. And that's exactly what unsettles them. Because when someone tries too hard, it's easy to ignore them, easy to label them, easy to dismiss them. But when someone doesn't try at all, when they simply exist and still manage to take up space in your thoughts, that's when it starts to feel dangerous. They replay moments, conversations, silences. Even the things you didn't say become louder than anything you ever could have. They start filling in the blanks, creating stories, building entire narratives just to make sense of why you affect them the way you do. But the harder they try to understand it, the deeper they fall into it. It becomes a loop, a cycle. Thought chasing thought with no resolution in sight. And that's where obsession begins to take shape. Not as admiration, not as curiosity, but as something heavier. Something that demands attention. They wake up thinking about you without realizing it. They catch themselves drifting back to you in the middle of their day. It interrupts them, distracts them, slowly takes control of spaces in their mind that were never meant to be occupied by anyone else. What really bothers them isn't you. It's what you represent. You become a question they can't answer, a feeling they can't label, a presence that refuses to fit into the neat little boxes they've created to keep their world organized. And people hate that. They hate what they can't define, what they can't predict, what they can't control. So they try to fight it. They talk about you over and over again, hoping that putting it into words will somehow shrink it, make it manageable. They analyze your actions, your tone, your silence, searching for a flaw, a reason, anything that would give them the upper hand again. But every attempt just pulls them deeper, because obsession doesn't weaken when you feed it attention. It grows stronger. It starts affecting them in ways they don't want to admit. Their mood shifts. Their focus breaks. Their sense of control slips little by little. And the worst part is, they know it. They can feel it happening, but they can't stop it. That's what makes it unbearable. Not the presence itself, but the loss of power over their own mind. Because once someone reaches that point, once your presence becomes something they can't ignore, something they can't escape, it's no longer about liking or disliking you. It's about being consumed by the idea of you. And when a person gets consumed, when their thoughts stop belonging entirely to them, they start looking for ways to fix it, to remove it, to silence it. But obsession doesn't listen to reason. Most people think power is loud. They think it's in the shouting, the showing off, the constant need to prove something. Noise gives them comfort because it's easy to recognize, easy to measure, easy to respond to. But real impact doesn't need to introduce itself. It doesn't knock on the door. It just walks in and rearranges everything without asking permission. You don't have to speak to be heard. That's what confuses them. They're used to signals, to obvious cues, to people who wear their intentions on the surface. But when someone operates in silence, when they move without explaining, without reacting, without seeking attention, it creates a kind of tension that people don't know how to handle. Silence leaves space, and in that space, their own thoughts start getting louder. They begin to notice things they can't quite explain. The way your presence shifts the atmosphere without effort. The way conversations change direction when you're around, even if you haven't said a single word. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's there. And the more they try to ignore it, the more aware of it they become. Silence forces people to fill in the gaps, and that's where the real impact begins, because what they imagine is often more powerful than anything you could have said out loud. They start projecting their own ideas, their own fears, their own assumptions onto you. You become whatever they think you are, and that version lives entirely in their mind, growing stronger with every unanswered question. There's something unsettling about not being able to read someone. It breaks the patterns people rely on. They can't predict your next move, can't prepare a response, can't control the outcome. And when people lose that sense of predictability, they start to feel exposed, vulnerable, like they're the only ones being seen while you remain untouched. You don't chase attention, and that's exactly why it follows you. People are drawn to what doesn't demand them. They circle around it, trying to understand it, trying to get a reaction, trying to confirm that what they're feeling is real. But the less you give them, the more they lean in. The absence of noise becomes louder than anything they've ever heard. They might try to provoke you, test you, push boundaries just to see if they can break that silence. Not because they're strong, but because they're uncomfortable. They need reassurance that you're like everyone else, that you'll eventually react, that you'll give them something they can hold on to. But when that reaction never comes, when that silence remains intact, it starts to get under their skin. Because silence isn't empty, it's controlled, it's deliberate, it's a choice. And when someone realizes that your lack of response isn't weakness but discipline, it changes the entire dynamic. Suddenly, They're the ones reacting. They're the ones trying. They're the ones losing control while you remain steady, unmoved. And that's where the shift happens. Power doesn't come from dominating the room. It comes from influencing it without effort, from making people question themselves without saying a word, from creating an effect that lingers long after you've left, without leaving behind any clear reason why. And when someone realizes they've been affected by something they can't even hear, can't even see clearly, can't even define, it stays with them longer than anything loud ever could. People like to believe their minds are stable, structured, predictable. They build routines, habits, systems, little frameworks that keep everything running smoothly. It gives them comfort, this illusion of control, this idea that as long as they follow the pattern, nothing can really shake them. But all it takes is one disruption, one presence that doesn't follow their rules, doesn't fit into their expectations, and suddenly the structure starts to crack. At first, it's small, almost unnoticeable, a thought that lingers a little longer than it should, a reaction that feels slightly out of place. They brush it off, tell themselves it's nothing, just a passing moment. But it doesn't pass. It repeats, quietly at first, then with more weight. And the more it repeats, the harder it becomes to ignore. Disruption isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It works underneath the surface, slowly shifting things out of alignment. What used to make sense starts to feel uncertain. What used to feel certain starts to slip. They begin to question things they never questioned before, not because they want to, but because something inside them won't stay still anymore. You don't need to do anything extreme to cause this. That's what makes it unsettling. It's not about force or aggression or obvious impact. It's about presence that doesn't behave the way it's supposed to. A reaction that doesn't match the situation. A calmness where there should be emotion. A silence where there should be words. It breaks their expectations, and once expectations are broken, the mind starts searching for answers. But there aren't any clear answers. That's where the real tension builds. The brain doesn't like uncertainty. It tries to resolve it, tries to make sense of it, tries to restore balance. So it starts working harder, digging deeper, analyzing everything in an attempt to fix what feels off. But instead of finding clarity, it finds more questions. That's when the disruption turns inward. It stops being about you and starts becoming about them. Why does this affect me? Why can't I ignore it? Why does this feel different? And every time they ask those questions, they reinforce the disruption. They give it more space, more energy, more attention. Their usual coping mechanisms stop working. Distractions don't distract the same way. Conversations feel hollow. Even moments that used to bring comfort start to feel slightly disconnected. It's like something has shifted just enough to throw everything out of sync, but not enough for them to point at it and say, "That's the problem." And the more they try to fix it, the worse it gets, because disruption isn't something you solve by force. It doesn't respond to pressure or urgency. It feeds on it. Every attempt to regain control becomes another sign that control is slipping. Every effort to restore balance only highlights how unbalanced things have become. They start noticing patterns where there aren't any, reading into details that never mattered before, replaying moments overanalyzing expressions, trying to decode something that was never meant to be decoded. It becomes exhausting, but they can't stop. Because once the mind is thrown off its axis, it keeps trying to find its center again. And somewhere in that process, something changes. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually. The way they think, the way they react, the way they see things, it all starts to shift. The disruption becomes part of them, woven into their thoughts, shaping their perspective without them even realizing it. And by the time they notice how deep it's gone, it's already too late to pretend everything is the way it used to be. People are comfortable with influence when they can trace it. When they can point to a cause, label it, categorize it, and move on. It makes them feel safe, like everything operates within rules they understand. But when influence shows up without a clear origin, without a visible effort, without a reason they can hold on to, it starts to feel wrong. Not dangerous in an obvious way, but unsettling in a way they can't quite explain. You don't announce it. You don't build it step by step in front of them. It's already there before they realize it exists. That's what makes it unexplainable. There's no moment they can go back to and say, "That's when it started." No clear interaction they can isolate and break down. It just appears, fully formed, sitting in their thoughts like it's always belonged there. They try to rationalize it. That's the first instinct. There must be a reason. There must be something you did, something you said, something that triggered this reaction. But the more they search, the more they come up empty. And that's when the discomfort begins to grow. Because if there's no reason, then there's no control. And if there's no control, then it can't be managed. It doesn't behave like normal influence. It doesn't fade when ignored. It doesn't weaken with distance. If anything, it gets stronger the less they engage with it directly. It lingers in the background, quiet but persistent, like a thought waiting for the right moment to surface again. And when it does, it feels just as strong, if not stronger, than before. They start to question themselves instead of questioning you. Maybe it's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm imagining things. But even that doesn't solve it, because the feeling doesn't go away. It stays consistent, steady, unaffected by their attempts to dismiss it. And consistency without explanation is what makes it hard to ignore. There's no pattern to follow, no behavior to predict. You don't react the way they expect. Don't respond the way others would. Sometimes there's nothing at all, just absence where there should be something. And that absence becomes part of the influence. It creates space for their mind to wander, to fill in the gaps with its own interpretations, its own assumptions. What they imagine starts to feel real, more real than anything you've actually shown. And because it comes from their own mind, it feels personal, tailored, like it was designed specifically for them, even though it wasn't. That's the strange part about unexplainable influence. It adapts without effort. It becomes whatever they need it to be in order to stay relevant. They might try to detach from it, convince themselves it doesn't matter. But detachment requires clarity, and clarity is exactly what they don't have. Without understanding the source, they can't fully separate from it. It becomes something they carry, not because they want to, but because they don't know how to put it down. And the longer it stays, the deeper it settles. It starts affecting decisions, reactions, even the way they see other people. Not in obvious ways, not in ways they can easily identify, but in subtle shifts that change the direction of their thinking. It becomes part of their internal process, influencing them from the inside out. And the most unsettling part is that they can't confront it. You can't argue with something you don't understand. You can't fight something you can't define. So it stays there, quiet, steady, impossible to fully grasp, shaping their thoughts without ever revealing how or why it got there. People build systems inside their minds to stay in control. Little frameworks that tell them what's right, what's wrong, what makes sense, what doesn't. These systems aren't random. They're carefully constructed over time, shaped by experience, reinforced by repetition, and protected by certainty. They rely on patterns, predictability, cause and effect. If this happens, then that follows. It keeps everything stable, manageable, safe. But those systems have a weakness. They only work when everything behaves the way it's supposed to. The moment something steps outside of that structure, something that doesn't follow the expected pattern, the system starts to struggle. It tries to process it, tries to fit it into existing rules, tries to label it using familiar logic. But when nothing matches, when there's no category to place it in, the system begins to overload. You don't break it with force. That would be too obvious, too easy to identify. You break it by existing in a way that doesn't align with their expectations, by responding differently, by not responding at all when a reaction is expected, by remaining steady where others would fluctuate. It creates a contradiction, and systems don't handle contradictions well. At first, the mind resists. It doubles down on what it knows. It tries to correct the anomaly, to bring everything back into alignment. They might dismiss you, minimize you, convince themselves you're irrelevant, just to protect the structure they rely on. But the contradiction doesn't disappear. It stays, quietly challenging everything they believe to be consistent. And the more it stays, the harder it becomes to ignore. Because every system depends on validation. It needs to prove itself right over and over again to maintain stability. But when something consistently refuses to validate it, when something keeps defying the expected outcome, the system starts to lose confidence in itself. That's when the cracks begin to spread. They start questioning the rules they once followed without hesitation. The assumptions they made automatically begin to feel uncertain. What used to be clear becomes blurred. What used to be predictable becomes unstable. And the system, instead of guiding them, starts to feel unreliable. They try to fix it, adjust it, add new rules, new explanations, anything that can restore that sense of control. But every adjustment creates more complexity, more exceptions, more contradictions. The system becomes heavier, harder to maintain, more fragile than before. And then something shifts. Instead of the system controlling them, they start reacting to the failure of the system itself. Their decisions become less certain, their reactions less consistent. They hesitate where they used to be confident, overthink where they used to act instinctively, because now every choice feels like it could expose another flaw in the structure they depend on. That's the moment where control starts slipping away. not in a dramatic collapse, but in subtle instability. A hesitation here, a doubt there, small fractures that spread quietly until the entire framework feels uncertain. And when a system built on certainty begins to question itself, it can't function the same way anymore. What makes it more unsettling is that they can't isolate the cause. They can't point to a single moment or a single action and say, that's what broke it, because it wasn't one thing. It was the accumulation of contradictions, the constant presence of something that didn't fit, didn't follow, didn't obey the rules they trusted. And once a system loses its ability to explain what's happening, it stops being a source of control. It becomes something they have to manage, something they have to work around, something that no longer feels solid beneath them. And when the structure that once defined their sense of stability starts to feel uncertain, they're left standing in something unfamiliar, something unstructured, something they were never prepared to navigate. Most people fear being forgotten more than anything else. They chase attention, approval, recognition, anything that leaves a mark, even if it fades the moment they walk away. It's temporary, but it's safe. Being remembered for a moment is easier than being impossible to forget. Because unforgettable isn't comfortable. It doesn't sit quietly in someone's memory. It stays active, present, intrusive. You don't become unforgettable by trying. Effort makes things predictable, and predictability makes things easy to process. What stays with people isn't what they fully understand. It's what they couldn't quite figure out, what didn't resolve itself neatly in their mind. That's what lingers. That's what returns when everything else has faded. At first, they don't even realize it. You pass through their awareness like anything else, just another moment, another interaction. But something about it doesn't close properly. It doesn't end the way it's supposed to. There's no clear conclusion, no emotional resolution, and because of that it stays open, a loose thread in their mind that keeps pulling their attention back. They try to move on, fill their time with other things, other people, other distractions, and it works for a while, but then something small triggers it, a word, a tone, a situation, and suddenly it's back. Not as a distant memory, but as something immediate, something present. Like it never really left. That's when it starts to bother them. Because forgetting requires closure. It requires understanding, acceptance, a sense that something has been completed. But when something remains unresolved, the mind keeps returning to it, trying to finish what was never finished. And the more it tries, the more it reinforces the memory. You become part of that loop. Not because of what you did, but because of what you didn't provide. No clear answers, no predictable reactions, no ending they could process and file away. You exist in their mind as something incomplete, and incomplete things demand attention. They might try to redefine you, reshape the memory into something that makes sense. Turn it into a story they can understand, something they can finally close. But every time they get close, something doesn't fit. A detail that doesn't align. A feeling that doesn't match the explanation. And just like that, the loop starts again. Over time, it stops being about memory and starts becoming part of their present thinking. It influences how they interpret new situations, how they react to new people. Not in obvious ways, not in ways they can easily trace, but in subtle shifts that come from something they never fully processed. That's what makes it uncomfortable. Because being unforgettable means existing beyond your actual presence. It means occupying space in someone's mind without permission, without effort, without even being there. And when someone realizes they can't fully remove that, can't fully control it, it creates a kind of tension they don't know how to resolve. They may try to suppress it, push it down, ignore it completely. But suppression doesn't erase anything. It just buries it deeper, where it becomes less visible but more ingrained. And the deeper it goes, the more it shapes things quietly, without drawing attention to itself. At some point, they stop trying to forget, not because they've accepted it, but because they've realized it doesn't work. The memory doesn't fade the way others do. It doesn't lose its edge. It stays sharp, clear, present in ways they can't explain. And when something remains that vivid, that persistent, that impossible to fully erase, it stops being just a memory and starts becoming part of how they think, how they see, how they react. Whether they want it there or not,